Hey guys, welcome back, and in this tutorial we're going to continue some of the looping statements, and in this case we're going to be using the while loop, which is very similar to the for loop that we just went through. And actually after this tutorial you'll probably be like, holy cow, that's the same thing that the for loop does. And actually you can basically turn a while loop into a for loop, you can turn a for loop into a while loop. There's going to be some cases where you'll want to use a for loop over a while loop, but you could do the same on both ways. So as we get going through here, you'll kind of understand what the benefits are to each one, and we'll work through that together. But anyways, we're going to do what we did similar to the last tutorial, where we're going to set a equal to 0. And the while loop is basically comprised of one condition, and this condition is going to be put in here as a parameter within the parentheses, whereas the for loop had 3 parameters that we established: initial value, then we also had the condition, and then we had the expression that was going to happen afterwards. In this case, we're just going to have the condition. So we're going to put something like a, as long as a is less than, whoops, wrong one, less than or equal to 7, this next part of the statement is going to happen. The next programming statement is going to happen. So right now it's set to 0, so we've got our initial value similar to the for loop. We've got our condition, so this loop is going to run continuously as long as a is less than or equal to 7. Now we're going to have a few program statements here, and now to have a few program statements we're actually going to put in some curly braces. Without the curly braces you could only have one program statement and that would execute. This allows us to put multiple program statements on these lines as long as it's within the curly braces, and all of the program statements will happen as long as we're in the loop here. Alright, so the first one that we're going to do is we're going to print to screen our integer there, and we're going to put the line break in there, and we're going to tell it to print our variable a. So the first one, it should come up as 0, similar to the program there. But the one thing that we haven't established is we haven't established the expression for a. So if we run this right now, let's go ahead and run it, you'll see that we get a build error, and that's probably because I don't have a semicolon there. So we're going to run it again, and you'll see that it's just repeating 0. It's actually in a loop that will never end, and that's probably not good for a computer, but it hasn't failed yet. So what I'm going to do is quickly change this so I don't blow up my computer. We're going to add the expression that we did similar to our other program, where we put a plus plus, or that's basically a plus 1. So we're going to increase this value by 1 every time to eventually end that loop. So let's go ahead and run that before it blows up our computer, and you see we get the same results as if we had the for loop from 0 to 7. And but essentially we set the initial value here, we evaluated it based on a condition, and then we also took that initial value and we increased it by 1 every time. Alright, so you're thinking, cool, that's kind of like the for loop. Let's go and actually apply it to something now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 numbers, and we're going to find the average of those 5 numbers. We're going to do that by first setting up a few variables. So this is going to be our count, and this is going to allow us to see if we put in 5 numbers or if we only have 3. So we're going to set that equal to 1 first, because 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to have 5 total. So we're going to start at 1, and then we're going to also put in a variable for numbers, and numbers is basically going to take whatever data the person puts in there. So if they put in 10, then 5, it's going to take those and start adding them for us. We're also going to set up another variable called total, which that's going to hold all of the numbers together and then eventually divide by our whatever 5 numbers to get our average. And then we're going to have an average as well, and we're going to put this the data type and the average as a float, just in case there are some decimal places that come about. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our while loop, and we're going to put a statement similar to what we did in the last while loop, is count is less than or equal to 5. Okay, because like I said, we're going to evaluate 5 numbers that the person puts into those system. And so we're starting with 1, so 1's going to be 1, 2's going to be 2, 3, so on and so forth, until it hits 5. Once it hits 5, it's not going to accept any other numbers from our user at this point. So now we're going to put in some curly braces because we're going to have a few different statements here. The first being, we're going to prompt the user saying something like enter number. And what we're going to do in this case is we're going to put a number sign, and we're going to put %i, alright, with a colon just so they know where it's going. And we're going to relay the count. So when this first prompts them, it's going to say enter number, and it's going to look to the count, and it's going to say enter number 1. Alright, so they know what number they're on. It's going to say that in the next statement, it's going to say enter number 2, and so on and so forth, as long as we write it correctly. And we're also going to pull in their user input with the scanf function here. And so we're going to pull in the integer, and don't forget your ampersand sign, and we're going to assign whatever they put into the computer as their number. The numbers that we're going to total up, and then we're going to divide by the total amount of numbers that we pulled in. And so we'll move on to the next thing there. So then we're going to take all their numbers, and we're going to set it equal to the total. We're basically going to be adding all these numbers together and setting them to the total here. Okay, so the first number will come in, and it'll be like 10 or something like that. So that 10 is going to add to the total, which the total we're just going to set to 0 for now. So 0 plus 10 equals 10. So now our total is equal to 10. Alright, then it's going to prompt them for for the second number there. Second number is, let's say, 15. So the 15 comes in plus the 10 that's already in there. So now our total is equal to 25. So you see how that's working so far within the loop? The last thing that we're going to do is we have to exit this loop at some given point. And you see here we're going to exit it when it hits 5. So once the users put in 5 numbers. So essentially what we need to do is we need to increase our count by 1 every time. So we're going to use the count plus plus to increase that count value. Alright, so now once we have the total and we've exited our loop here, our while loop, once this hits the 5th number that they've received, it's going to exit the loop, and it's going to go down here to the next statement that we're going to put in. And that is essentially, we're going to establish our average variable as the total divided by, and in this case we're not going to do it programmatically, we're just going to put 5 because we know we're going to have 5 numbers coming in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to print this out to the screen, something like average equals %f. Now remember, the average is going to be a float value, so we're going to use %f there. And in this case, we're going to be calling for the average variable. All right, so that is going to be our program. So we're going to run that, see if we did everything correctly. So now it's asking us for our number 1. We're going to put in 10. Enter number 2. We're going to put in 15. Number 3, 50. Number 4, 40. Number 5, let's put in like 70. And we should get what is the average of all of these 5 together, which is 37. I'm not going to check that because I don't even know, but that sounds about right. So essentially what we did is we had a while loop that counted the number of inputs that we have. Starting with 1, the first one here, goes through and it prompts us for a number. We input a number. That number goes in and adds to the total of our program, our variable program here, total. Every time it comes to here, the count increases. So now we're on count number 2. Enter number, count number 2. We enter number, it goes in, totals. Once it gets to 5, it exits the loop. The average comes here, and the average is our total, which was totaling in here, divided by the total number of numbers to find the average. And then we simply output the average of those numbers and the total there. So that's just like a little program you guys can make to fully understand kind of the while loop. You can still do it with the for loop and all that stuff. So we'll catch you guys in the next tutorial.